Hi, everybody. It's Laura at Sheer Passion. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Friday night. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's so special to me, and it's how my family, my husband and my stepson have come together, and we've formed this bond that is so special to us. And all three of us have come from very different backgrounds. But some of the things that I'd like to share with you are how we see our beginnings. And so I want to explain to you how I see my faith and how I use my faith to try to understand our birth and why it's so important for us to understand that in itself. Once again, this has everything to do with my faith in God and sending His Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross and having the Holy Spirit reside within me. The biggest thing is, when you really start to think about all of the things that happen on this planet, we have to understand God's story in its entirety. So when we start understanding that before the cross, people had to act out spiritual acts to understand the intention behind making a decision. There's so much in our culture that is a stronghold linked to shame, which is sin. Let me give you a different perspective. From somebody who totally understands how much damage you can do in your life by making the wrong choices, I absolutely know that my sin, or my choices, another word for sin, is that it led me down a road that did not bless me, but God's will allowed it in my life because He has given us free will. Prior to being here, I was just a figment of people's imagination. But in God's will, He allowed my parents and the act of sex, which we don't talk enough about in the Christian walk, to become a part of their family. You know, if we want to really understand why our culture is going downhill and there's so much damage in families, it is because we've never really thought about how important the birth process is. Just because people have sex doesn't mean that a baby is produced. And you may think that you really intentionally think about that, but you have to understand then that in God's will, when a child is created, He chooses in that moment for that act of sex to bring forth life. If every act of sex does not make life or bring forth life, and every baby that is in the womb is born alive, imagine how much more important the people that actually make it here onto the planet are. I really think in the entirety of God's story, in His will, when He allows people to be formed in the womb and He creates us, He created me, and He created me for a purpose. In that act of sex that my parents had, I was created one time. That was it. And we had to wait 9 months until I got here. The same thing for you. But when you really think about it, the same thing for my husband and my stepson. When we get here, if we don't try to understand what the choice is when we choose God and why it's so important to choose Him, we start to allow ourselves to believe in all of the toxicity that is weighing on us and pulling us down. I don't see sin the same way. I see sin as a choice. And until we understand that God had given us something so powerful called free will so that we were not robots for Him, but created for a purpose, we need to start thinking about how important being born is. When we get here, we are either going to be created to make a change in the world for a positive difference or for a negative difference. Then how much more important is the parenting process? How much more important is it for that baby to be given to people who understand what is going to happen when the choices that they've made prior to having the baby impacted themselves and everyone from there on out? Let's not get caught up on all of the bad stuff that we've done. If we are capable as family units to talk about all things, imagine how much more quickly we will be wanting to share that with the younger generation when we've all made poor choices that have led us down a road that we're not happy to be on. but fully understood the lesson in making the choice, understood the consequence, became fully accountable and responsible to make a change if what had come before that had become destructive in our lives. You know, when we get here on the planet, being born is God's intention. He has an intention for us to walk this earth and to totally understand that we can choose wisely. We can be linked to Him. We can choose God or we can choose no God. And when we choose no God, we decide to do things in our sinful nature, which He had to allow to be in our systems so that we were not robots. And if you understand that, you can start to grasp why it's so important to read God's story from the beginning to the end and see it in its entirety. Give me 1 second here. I think something is in the way of the video. There we go. I want to share this with you. So much on a daily basis runs through my head. I am walking with God every day. I ask Him questions. I want to learn more. I want to be one of the most wise women that walks the planet, not because I made all of the right decisions, but I want God to know my heart, that because I didn't make all of the right decisions, but I was willing to be accountable and responsible for those choices and to be standing on my own 2 feet and not to place blame, but to understand. You know, it's always been my desire for people to have an opportunity to talk things out. I believe that being human, if you understand the way humans operate and the way we work best, you will start to understand that in God's will, He had placed all of these things within us to work wisely, which is also linked to rational thought. So if you want to be a wise person, you're going to have to start to open up and understand how you operate in your human body, what actually gets you thinking. How do you operate with your emotions? Are you capable of taking care of yourself? Can you put shelter over your head? Can you provide yourself with food and water? Do you have a job? What do you do with your hands and your feet during the day to make a blessing in your local neighborhoods and communities? See, being born is a gift. It is a gift to the people that chose an act of sex prior to us getting here. But the child is a gift to those people, because once the child gets to the planet, they can be helping us give hope, love, light to other people, or they can be taking us the other direction. We are going to have to answer for the things that we do here on this planet, because nobody is to blame but ourselves. When we really want to make the changes, we're going to have to start to understand that in the beginning, when we were created, there has to be a purpose, because there's more to just having sex, to getting people here on the planet, and how we're not in control of that. Because if we were in control of that, we would be able to just have sex, and a child would come out of every act of sex if we were in control of life. We're not in control of life. God is in control of life. He creates each person for a purpose, and we are to live out that purpose. I feel so fully connected to understanding that it's easier to talk to people about your walk with God when you have one. It's easier to talk to people about the things you've gone through when you will be honest about how you operated in those areas of your life. You know, we're so quick to share the positive things. Why? I think we should be quick to share the negative things and how we used God to be our strength and how we asked for wisdom to come up out of that, because that's going to be the only way that the next generation of children that come into this world have an opportunity to be living in places that sense and understand how important their birth is. Their birth marks the difference between choosing a positive walk and changing the world for the Lord, or adding to the suffering by bringing them into locations that do not serve Jesus and do not understand what it is to accept salvation, to start walking with God and creating a relationship with Him and telling others. It doesn't mean that I don't have to live this wonderful, full life that I have. There's freedom in worship because God dying on the cross gives me freedom in worship. But it doesn't give me the freedom to not understand the story in its entirety. And just because we're living in the New Testament times doesn't mean that we aren't to go back and understand God's book the whole way through. There is a purpose to being born. There is a purpose to having families that are functioning. We need to be part of the process to change. I hope this has gotten you to think. This is so important because all of us have a purpose in this life, and we need to intentionally walk that every day. It is very important for me to see my stepson thrive in this world, and I will do anything that I can to share with him the mistakes that I've made, the accountability that I held to myself to get help, and to see the consequences through by asking God to really change my attitude and to change my heart and to give me the opportunity to choose more wisely in the future. That is so important to being human, because the next person that you want to share God with is going to be very much in that same place of reality, very much human, very much making mistakes and needing an opportunity to come up out of those mistakes by having accountability held to them. Until we want to be honest about that and how since birth we have had those same obstacles, we are not going to change the world. We cannot walk a perfect life, but we can walk a real life. I hope that has given you hope this week. That is something that makes so much sense to me. I would love your feedback. I wish this screen would pop questions up as I'm talking, because it is so much fun to do, to get you to think and to think with you. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to share with you soon. Have a great week.